So thank you so much for inviting me to participate in your conference. I'm really sorry that I'm unable to be with you today. Various commitments have me in Camrose working steadily away at some projects. So thank you to Rob Fennell and the Atlantic School of Theology for considering me, and also to Sean Loney, who I'm sure is entertaining you well over these few days. And also to you, the audience, for your time and attention. So my name is Rajan Ratnavalu, and I'm one of the helpers at NEWO Global Energy, and I'm here to share with you a bit about our company and its origins and how we got here and a bit of where we're going. So generally in a talk, you wait a bit for the energy to settle and for the angels to gather in your collective and create the moment. In lieu of that, I'll share with you a video that hopefully will allow some attention to enter into the space that is our company. Okay, here goes. The sun comes up every day and sends a ton of energy to the world, and why not capture that? Our story begins in Camrose, Alberta. So I grew up here. Also went to university here and was studying mostly religion and philosophy actually, but also some issues in oil and gas. And some friends and I realized how difficult it is for people to contemplate a switch to another completely new industry. Hi, this is Raj at NEWO Global Energy. How can I help you? We thought we'd take it on as our own responsibility to develop a company that tried to facilitate the transition to a new energy future. Okay, thanks so much. As Albertans, we have tremendous wealth. Those who've been given a lot have a responsibility to share, and whatever money we make beyond our own personal needs, then we'll put that back into the community through education projects, through international development work, and through various things that not only take into account our local communities, but the broader communities of the globe and also future generations.
Okay, ready to rock?
Yep.
Okay.
So this is our first project of this size and our first major ground mount system for NEWO Global Energy. We're on a farmer's field, and you can see behind me James and Adrian are just putting up our first solar module. Once the solar modules are up, Adrian and his crew will do the electrical wiring and pretty quickly be set up to generate power. Incorporating new technologies like solar, we're hoping a lot more farmers' fields will have not only the canola, but also solar panels.
All right, 2 up, 74 to go.
You know, a typical system on a home roof will replace the carbon from the atmosphere just like a tree would. So instead of burning coal to produce our electricity, you're actually just taking the sun, which is going to come anyways, and translating that to your toaster or whatever you want to use it for. A system like this, between maybe 12-15 years, will pay back for itself, and then from that time on, you're generating your own power free of charge coming from the sun every morning. Here we go.
That's it.
The people of Camrose have played an integral part in our success. That's what's made it possible for us to have the courage to step into the unknown, to try this out and to see where it takes us. Okay, so I thought I'd just share a little bit about myself to ground the story of the company in the personal. The roots of social enterprise, I feel, at their best, run very deep inside the people who have made a commitment to live out a life of service in the form of business. So I suppose for myself, I start with my parents. They met as teachers in Zambia, crossed racial lines in their marriage at a time when it was illegal in my father's home country of South Africa, and really embodied for me the spirit of love transcending the limitations that humans often impose upon ourselves. We moved to Canada when I was 2 years old, firstly to Desmarais Wabasca, where my parents taught, and really that was my, I think, initial education into the world, or the multiple worlds of Canada. So when we moved to Camrose, my hometown, where our company is based, I really experienced firsthand the effects of a divided country, and really felt myself to be living in a very different place than when I'd, I guess, first grew up in Big Stone Cree country. So, yeah, these origins have an influence on our lives in seen and unseen ways. I traveled for a couple of years in Latin America before starting university, and really see myself primarily as an educator first. I've always had sort of a tenuous relationship with formal education, and left university after dropped out of McGill, then left my second year here at the U of A campus at Augustana, and really went on a 11, 12-year journey to seek, I suppose, contemplative foundations for my life and living in the world. 8 of those years I spent as a Buddhist monk, and really it's those foundations that form and orient my work in the world. So initially, as I mentioned in the video, thanks to Telus for that video. As an aside, none of us have business background, so our business plan was serendipity and luck, and along with some other, I think, more, I guess, philosophical and spiritual orientations more than anything, and just decided to plunge into the business world. And along the way I've met with so many lucky encounters. I have no idea why Telus chose to do that little commercial for us, but anyways, here we are. So getting back to education, yeah, again, I mentioned studying some issues, oil and gas, particularly hydraulic fracturing in Alberta, and that's what really sparked my interest in the world of, I guess, commerce. I felt it was really unfair to ask oil and gas workers, or anyone for that matter, to live out the values that I believed in. So rather than sitting at the sidelines criticizing the people who heat my homes to a wonderful 20 degrees in the winter, I thought it important to step into the field and really try to live out some of the hopes for transition of economy and society. So initially the idea was to embody the principles of a class that formed around the work we'd done in fracking. So some students and I and a professor organized a conference on fracking, and that evolved over the long term into a project called Spirit of the Land, which really takes a look at more of the contemplative and spiritual, cultural roots of why we are disconnected from both ourselves, one another, and the natural world around us. So Spirit of the Land evolved. It was a project sort of year by year that gathered new life and kept on going, and was a way to try to explore some of these ideas that I'd had leaving university, to try to discover a spiritual life for myself, and then wondering how, upon my return, how I could integrate these two worlds. And as the course and annual conference progressed in its popularity and some degrees influence and success, it also became clear that there's a gap between the passion of a classroom and work in the world. So a lot of students may enter environmental science with a keen love for planet and people and end up trying to find a job, and really, at least in Alberta, a lot of people end up monitoring the oil and gas industry and maybe practices that aren't necessarily aligned with their initial hopes. So such is our world of compromise and complexity. And so our company really developed out of a wish to try to embody some of the ideals and care that we'd hope to foster in the classroom. Classroom, I say loosely, we really tried to imagine ourselves away from a classroom and really in the community and community life. So that's where the origins of NEWO developed. I was sharing this plan or this wish with a friend, Elder Roy Lewis, who lives down the road in Musquecheese and has been, he and his wife Judy, good family friends for many years. And sharing with him this vision, and Roy took out the proverbial napkin at his kitchen table and began to draw the 4 elements of Mother Earth: water, wind, and fire. So for the Plains Cree of this area, the 4 elements, the number 4 in general is very sacred. We have the 4 directions, the 4 elements, the 4 seasons, the 4 aspects of being human. And Roy suggested we call ourselves NEWO, which is the Cree word for 4. And as he drew on his napkin, I took out a computer and drew my own rendering. And he said during that conversation, you should have global in your name because this teaching is for the world. And thus our company, NEWO, or NEWO Global Energy, was born. So really, NEWO tries to embody the underlying spirit of care and compassion. And as you probably may know, the 4 elements are mirrored in contemplative tradition inside ourselves. So the main foundations is as we become spiritually aligned within ourselves and express that in the world, naturally we will do right by our actions and activities. So we started with the fire element, maybe because the sun mimics the spirit of love in that it shines every day, regardless of our care or concern or whether we give back, and is this limitless, boundless energy that gives life and health to the planet. So really, we weren't too concerned about technical expertise. The world has far and beyond enough technical expertise to solve our material problems. The real missing energy is the energy of compassion and care for one another. So we sent one of our close friends, Ryan, to a 5-day solar training program. Of course, he only took 3 days and then went guiding on the river. And when he finally ended up completing the course a year later, after having found some work in the solar industry, we met our master electrician, Adrian Mohammed, and couldn't have asked for a nicer person. So one of our goals was to hire former oil and gas workers, and Adrian amongst them. There are currently thousands of out-of-work electricians in Alberta because of the downturn. And so we're hoping to do our part to help facilitate a transition. So the projects, initially the first round of friends and family, we were very lucky to have Jan and David Edwards more acquaintances really that I got to know through the course of our work with them. But they are a couple over 80 years old, and really had as, I guess, their sense, future generations in mind. Often the question first asked is, well, when is payback? And this wasn't a question that Jan and David were asking. So we're really proud that they were our first customers and that they embody our wish for a new economy. So solar was our first venture, and again, just thinking holistically, we often conjoin training programs wherever we go. So our most recent training program was with Indigenous youth, with the Yellowhead Tribal Council for Nations, and we're working with Yellowhead Council to develop a several month-long training program to really empower Indigenous youth and of all ages really, to make this transition and have a leg up into this emerging industry. Along those lines, we've also partnered with the Bissell Centre, which is Edmonton's major homeless shelter, to provide a training program along with an installation. So usually solar installations, the company comes in, they put up the solar and they leave. And we got the Bissell contract through an open tender bid because I think because we had in mind the longer term interests of the people and community that the Bissell Centre serves. So as you can see in the picture, there's this other section that is set off aside to be a training solar array that is dismantled and reassembled every year with each training program. And so it was that care to, I think, the larger needs of the community that helped us secure the contract. So in many ways, I think social enterprise really addresses the heart of what it means to do a business, which is to serve the community and particularly our clients. And so I think what we find with social enterprise is that it takes a lot of the gifts of a regular business and simply has first and foremost this sense that what we are doing is in the service of others. And in many ways it's not that far off from a business model, but I think the godlike powers of small g, of profit and personal gain, I think, have trumped the world, and we're seeing a new alignment with the emergence of social enterprise communities. So along with the solar, we've started a water division, and this is largely in response to Sean's visit to us last year at our annual conference. And some students saw actually Mark Sobrano from Toronto, another friend who I'm sure Sean will mention, presented on his toilet and water retrofit program in Toronto. And some students were inspired. They Googled how to retrofit toilets on YouTube, then put out an ad on Kijiji, and then that week swapped out their toilet at home, and then found somebody in Sherwood Park to do the same. So really this shows the dynamism of, I think, the next generation that is ready, aware of the problems, aware of the limits of the current paradigm, and really ready and willing to act based on deeper principles. So actually just this week we submitted a proposal to Camrose City Council to retrofit every toilet, showerhead and faucet in the city. We presented earlier this year and were extremely well received, and now on Monday we'll present to Council as they do their budget deliberations, and we hope that we will be the first community in Canada to do such a thing. As part of this, we are doing training programs for recent refugees to Canada, and I think this is what we'll see in the future, where it's a win for the environment, it's a win for the community, It's a win for people with barriers to employment, and we don't see this conflict between ecology or economy, which really is a somewhat nonsensical conflict when you begin to think about what economy and ecology really mean. So the other project that we're currently working on is potentially purchasing a farm, the farm that we visited with our Spirit of the Land classes, and really carrying on the legacy of the good work of the farmers who have really cared for and loved that piece of prairie. So this is part of a larger conversation on many levels. Water, land on the prairies, we're going to see a massive transition in terms of ownership of prairie land over the next 5, 10, 15 years. And hopefully in this transition we'll have something to add and a way of participating meaningfully in the wider currents. I think I'll end with the contemplative roots and really saying that these are the foundations. I think with stillness comes the capacity to let go of the momentum that ties us to pathways that are unproductive and in many ways hurtful. And it releases us from our own inner commitments to paradigms that don't necessarily embody our deepest values. The spirit of gratitude, I feel, arises naturally as we consider the gifts of what it means to be here, to be loved, and to be materially supported. As Canadians, we're probably one of the wealthiest civilizations in the history of humanity, and yet somehow our current lack of connection with ourselves leaves us in a deficit model, which really isn't reflective of the bounty and gifts that are all around us. So a spirit of gratitude, a sense of the fragility of life, and connection to community, all of these are spiritual principles that I feel, as they are fostered within ourselves, we'll naturally use the tools around us to do good by them. And so I think for myself, I'm not a solar person, I'm not necessarily a water retrofit person. There's a deeper, wider conversation that is more important than these technical replacements. And if we get that part right, I think everything will follow. And yeah, that's the gift we have to give to ourselves and to the world around us. So there's probably so many things I've forgotten. Obviously, this work relies on so many people, and I think that's our real strength, is the strength of community. I don't have business skills, I don't know how to wire electricity, but there are people who do, and I think it's the compassion that we share for the world around us that brings our collective gifts to a common table and helps us to use them in the wisest and most compassionate manner. So thank you so much. I wish you all the best. This is good work. I'm very grateful for your time and hope one day we might be able to meet in person.